Welcome guys, welcome back to another video. We're back today with, first of all, welcome to Midcourse Corner. Hope you have a great day. We're back! Napoleon's Marshals. There were a lot of people who were saying me, this episode's gonna be crazy. I hope it is, especially about Oudinot. Apparently the guy's, he's a menace. So he's pretty cool, apparently. So we're gonna learn a lot about the Marshals today. If you like my reaction, as always, like, subscribe, and all that. And yeah, I'll give my thoughts throughout the commentary. Let's go. So it was loud, huh?
Terror belli, decus pacis.
That's.
Terror in war.
I need to buy myself a fucking
in
bottle.
peace. The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton. In France, the title of Marshal or Maréchal goes back at least to the 13th century. It represents the highest possible position of military authority, authority symbolized by a marshal's baton. The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age. But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's Marshals. All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as marshals, with expert guidance from Lieutenant Colonel Rémy Porte, former chief historian of the French army.
All right, come on.
So far, we've met Marshals Perignon, Brune, Serrurier, Kellerman, Grouchy, Moncey, Poniatowski, Jourdan, Bernadotte, Augereau, Lefebvre, Mortier, and Marmont. First, a big thanks to our video sponsor, Blinkist. Blinkist is here to help. Gouvion Saint-Cyr was a gifted student who ran away from a miserable childhood to become an artist.
Jesus Christ.
A passionate Republican, he embraced the French Revolution and later volunteered for military service. Though proud and aloof by nature, his Republican politics and sharp intellect ensured he was elected captain of his company. His skill at drawing enemy positions then got him noticed by General Custine, who gave him a job on his staff. During these turbulent early years of the Revolution, Custine was one of several generals who was punished for defeat with a trip to the guillotine.
Damn.
Saint-Cyr's instinctive grasp of warfare, brilliant planning and tactics won him promotion from volunteer to general of division in 2 years. An even more remarkable achievement, as he'd had no formal military training. But his cold, analytical approach meant that he was always a respected leader, rather than loved. After 5 years' service with the Army of the Rhine, he was sent to Italy.
So he was very
At the disastrous Battle of Novi, he commanded the French right wing, but skillfully extricated his troops from the debacle. The next year he was back on the Rhine and won a brilliant victory over the Austrians at Bibrach. But a bitter dispute with his commander, General Murat, encouraged rumours that Saint-Cyr was impossible to work with. Saint-Cyr believed soldiers should not meddle in politics, and did not support Napoleon's seizure of power in 1799. Nor did he show much enthusiasm for Napoleon's decision to crown himself emperor 5 years later. His political views cost him dearly. Saint-Cyr was sidelined for several years, while less able.
So he was someone who wasn't willing to play the game, so to speak. He's the Ned Stark of the age.
The generals were made marshals. In 1805, he commanded French forces in central Italy. But when he was made...
He really is the Ned Stark. No, think about it. The guy, he's respected, but he's not loved. I mean, he's loved in his, he's respected. Okay? Ned Stark is respected. He's not really loved. Robert Baratheon was loved. Stark, square.
Subordinate to Marshal Massena, a man whom he personally detested, he returned to Paris even when Napoleon threatened to have him shot for desertion.
Yeah.
In 1808, Saint-Cyr was given command of a corps for the invasion of Spain, but his failure to take Girona meant he was relieved of command. Leaving in a fury before his replacement, Marshal Oudinot, had arrived, he was nearly court-martialed again for desertion. Saint-Cyr's military talent, however, was not in doubt. In 1812, he was recalled for the Russia campaign, with command of 6th Bavarian Corps. His role was to support Marshal Oudinot in guarding the northern flank of the French salient. When Wittgenstein's Russians attacked at Polotsk, Oudinot was wounded, and Saint-Cyr took over command, turning probable defeat into a brilliant victory.
Nice.
For this achievement, Napoleon awarded Saint-Cyr his Marshal's baton. But 2 months later, at a second Battle of Polotsk, Saint-Cyr was attacked by a larger Russian army, seriously wounded in the foot and forced to pull back. His injury meant he missed the worst horrors of the Russian retreat, but he contracted typhus early in 1813 and was sick for many months. Saint-Cyr returned to the Grande Armée in August, taking command of 14th Corps and the defence of Dresden. Incredibly, this was the first and only time that he worked directly alongside the Emperor,
No
and
way.
both soon learned new respect for each other's abilities. Saint-Cyr's skilled defence of Dresden set the stage for Napoleon's great victory there later that month. But Saint-Cyr was incredulous when Napoleon later ordered him to remain in Dresden, while other forces concentrated for the decisive Battle of Leipzig, 60 miles to the west. Napoleon's defeat at Leipzig meant that Saint-Cyr and other garrisons in the east were cut off and had to surrender that autumn. Saint-Cyr took no part in the 100 Days.
Yeah, I wouldn't as well. Especially from his point of view. I mean, the guy was sidelined so many times. Sometimes luck plays a role, man. Luck. The guy was talented from what he said, but it just didn't work out. He was unlucky in many ways. In many ways, he was lucky that he didn't go into the Russian campaign. He didn't suffer as much. But sometimes,
Determined to keep out of France's political disputes. Under the restored monarchy, he served as Minister of War and tried, but failed, to save Marshal Ney from the death penalty. He also struggled to enact military reforms in the face of royalist opposition, eventually resigning in disgust and retiring to his country estate.
hey, at least you have an estate.
Marshal Saint-Cyr remains one of the great what-ifs of the Napoleonic Wars, an extremely able commander sidelined for his politics, who might well have proved one of Napoleon's.
Yeah, sometimes that's what proves, that's a good example of where honor and deciding not to play the game or being too stubborn is an admirable quality, but it doesn't do you a favor in the long run. Now, in his case, he survived the war. He wasn't executed, so you may say it served him to play, the honorable. I don't, meddle in politics, but
his very best marshals. 12.
I've heard a lot about
Marshal
you,
Oudinot.
Not very bright, dude. There's one subscriber who said me,
Nicolas Oudinot ran away to join the army aged 17. But his father dragged him home 3 years later to help run the family business. When the revolution began, he volunteered for the National Guard and was promoted to major. In the wars that followed, he served with the Army of the Rhine, always in the thick of the fighting, rapidly promoted and frequently wounded, a habit for which he became celebrated.
Okay, I understand why they...
In 1799, he was promoted to General of Division and sent to Switzerland to serve as General Massena's new Chief of Staff, a role he performed to perfection. Serving with General Brune in Italy, he led a cavalry charge against an Austrian battery at the Battle of Monzembano, sabering gunners and capturing one cannon himself, a feat for which Napoleon awarded him a Sword of Honor. In 1805, the newly crowned Emperor Napoleon gave Oudinot command of an elite grenadier division formed from the tallest, strongest soldiers in the army. In December that year, at the Battle of Austerlitz, Oudinot insisted on leading the division in person, despite having been shot in the thigh 2 weeks earlier. His grenadiers were kept in reserve for most of the battle, but saw heavy fighting in the latter stages, as Napoleon completed the destruction of the Allied left wing. At the Siege of Danzig in 1807, General Oudinot's division had the unusual distinction of capturing an enemy warship, a British sloop that had run aground trying to resupply the city. A month later, at Friedland, Oudinot and his grenadiers were under Marshal Lannes' command and played a crucial role holding up the Russian army, until Napoleon arrived to deal a decisive blow. During the 1809 war with Austria, Oudinot was wounded once more at the Battle of Aspern. When Marshal Lannes died of his wounds, Napoleon chose Oudinot to succeed him as commander of 2nd Corps. He led his new corps with such success at Wagram 6 weeks later that Napoleon attributed victory to Massena and Oudinot.
That's a great
honor. A week
honor.
later, he became one of 3 new marshals, one for France, one for the army, one for friendship. Oudinot, the army's choice.
Marmont, man. Marmont, the guy is always gonna make me laugh. The guy, he was friends with Napoleon, so that's how he became a marshal. And then Napoleon's like, I'm making you a marshal. But like behind closed doors, he's like, you know, you don't really deserve this.
Fearless and much loved, a man whose courage inspired all around him. He later received an additional reward, the title Duke of Reggio.
Nice.
In 1812, Marshal Oudinot led 2nd Corps into Russia, but was wounded again at Polotsk and handed over command to General Saint-Cyr. 10 weeks later, he was back with his corps, marching south to join up with Napoleon's army on its retreat from Moscow. Oudinot's men were shocked when they saw their old comrades from the main column. They looked more like fugitives than soldiers of the Grande Armée.
Yeah, Russia was tough, man.
Since Oudinot's 2nd Corps was in better shape than most, it formed the vanguard for the desperate crossing of the Berezina River. But the next day, in bitter fighting to hold the bridgehead against the Russians, Oudinot was shot from his saddle. He was carried back to a cottage with a serious gunshot wound, but then he and his party became surrounded by Cossacks.
Yeah, there's certain people that survive everything. And then there's one guy goes out the house for the first time in 20 years and a fucking boss kills him. This guy survives, how many times was he killed, shot in battle, or wounded? Now he's in the middle of Russia, gets shot, goes into the middle of a fucking cabin.
Oudinot asked for his pistols, and from his bed, aiming through an opening opposite, began firing at the Cossacks. They were
I understand why a subscriber of mine told me this guy, watch out for Oudinot, the guy's a badass. He is a badass.
Rescued by friendly troops, just in time.
What the hell, man?
Oudinot was back with the Grande Armée in Germany in 1813. In August, Napoleon ordered him to lead an advance on Berlin, but he was defeated by Bernadotte's Army of the North at Grossbeeren. He then retreated in the wrong direction, causing Napoleon to remark, "It's truly difficult to have less brains than the Duke of Reggio."
Damn.
In Oudinot's defense, he'd probably been given an impossible task. Insufficient men to take on a strong opponent, bad weather, terrible roads, and he himself unwell, possibly not yet recovered from his ordeal in Russia. Napoleon put Oudinot back where he was most effective, leading troops in combat under his close supervision. At Leipzig, he commanded 2 divisions of the Young Guard, engaged in heavy fighting on the southern front for 2 days. Oudinot continued to serve the Emperor courageously and loyally as a corps commander in the final campaign of 1814. But in April, he was one of several marshals to confront Napoleon with the reality of his position and force his abdication. When Napoleon returned from exile in 1815, Oudinot refused to break his new oath to the monarchy, but declared neutrality, telling Napoleon, "Since I shall not serve you, sire, I shall serve no one."
That's loyal, man.
He continued to hold senior commands under the Bourbons. By one estimate, Oudinot was wounded 36 times in his military career, more than any other marshal. Here are just 20 that we found details for. A fellow officer who bathed with him at a spa after the war.
We're going over them, of course. Jesus. Gunshot wound to the head. Gunshot wound, what is this? To the torso. Gunshot wound on a... 5 saber wounds? Are you fucking kidding me? Gunshot wound to the abdomen. Gunshot wound to the thigh. Broken leg. Broken leg. The guy's fucking Oudinot, man. Broken leg? Are you kidding me? Gunshot wound to the other thigh. 3 saber cuts to the arm. Gunshot wound to the arm. Gunshot wound to the shoulders. Grape shot wound. I don't know what that is. And saber cut to the neck. The guy's invincible. We got that. The guy died when he was 80 years old. You know, there's people. There's certain people. What the fuck?
Saw the scars on his body and observed he was little more than a colander. Ironically, Oudinot was also one of the longest-lived marshals.
Yeah, 80 years
dying
old.
aged 80 while serving as governor of Les Invalides. Marshal Victor.
How the hell isn't Oudinot in the top 5? Number 12? Who's number...
Claude Victor Perrin was an experienced soldier by the time of the French Revolution, a sergeant with 8 years' service in the Grenoble artillery regiment. The Revolutionary Wars brought the opportunity for rapid promotion, and by 1793 he was commanding an infantry battalion at the Siege of Toulon. He led a daring night assault on British defences alongside the army's artillery chief, a young Major Bonaparte. Both men were wounded, but the attack was a success, and both were quickly promoted to Brigadier General. Victor served under General Bonaparte in Italy, and turned out to be a brilliant brigade commander. In 1800, he distinguished himself at the Battle of Marengo, where his command of the left wing won particular praise from Napoleon. But Victor did not hide his disapproval of Napoleon's quest for political power, and as a result, received relatively minor roles under the new regime. In 1802, he was earmarked to lead an expedition to recover the French territory of Louisiana, but it was called off when Napoleon decided instead to sell Louisiana to the United States. Victor and Marshal Lannes were close.
How many territories did the United States purchase instead of conquer? The Louisiana Purchase and Alaska. And they bought them for like pennies on the dollar.
Friends from their days serving together in Italy. In 1806, Lannes persuaded Napoleon to let him have Victor as his new chief of staff for 5th Corps. Napoleon agreed, and in October, Victor served as Lannes' deputy at the Battle of Jena. Napoleon's earlier misgivings about Victor were now forgotten, and that winter he was given command of the newly formed 10th Corps. But within weeks, he was captured by a Prussian patrol and had to be exchanged for a captured Prussian officer, General von Blücher.
What? They exchanged Blücher? The guy who, at the Battle of Waterloo, who eventually dealt the...
His big break came in 1807, stepping in for the wounded Marshal Bernadotte to command 1st Corps at Friedland, where he successfully led a major attack as the Emperor looked on. Promotion to Marshal and the title Duke of Bellumo swiftly followed. In 1808, Marshal Victor and 1st Corps took part in the invasion of Spain, where he'd be posted for the next 3 years. Victor's record in Spain was better than most, But like others, he seemed more interested in personal glory and rewards than in cooperating with fellow commanders. In 1809 at Medellin, he inflicted a crushing defeat on General Cuesta's Spanish army. 4 months later, his bold night attack on the British at Talavera came tantalizingly close to success. He was furious the next day when King Joseph and Marshal Jourdan refused to support fresh attacks and instead ordered a cautious withdrawal. The next year, Victor besieged the Spanish port of Cadiz. It proved a lengthy, futile operation, devoid of glory, and saw his troops defeated by an Allied sortie at the Battle of Barossa. In 1812, Victor was recalled from Spain for the invasion of Russia. His 9th Corps was held in reserve for most of the campaign, though his troops were kept busy defending depots and convoys from Cossack raids. That autumn, his corps attempted to cover the main army's retreat from Moscow. The greatest crisis of the retreat came at the Berezina River. As the remnants of the Grande Armée began crossing over 2 improvised bridges, Victor's 9th Corps was ordered to form the rearguard. Though heavily outnumbered, Victor skillfully handled his French and German troops, holding the Russians at bay as the army made its escape. He then marched his surviving troops over the bridges in good order, a courageous performance in desperate circumstances. In Germany in 1813, Victor commanded 2nd Corps and led the attack in Napoleon's last great victory at Dresden. His corps was in heavy fighting again at Leipzig 2 months later. Victor continued to serve at the Emperor's side in the defence of France in 1814. By now, like many comrades, he must have been close to physical and psychological exhaustion. Regardless, during the Battle of Montereau, Napoleon let fly at him for failing to get his troops into position and blamed him for the Allies' escape. Victor was relieved of command, but angry and humiliated at what he considered his unfair dismissal, he told the Emperor, "Marshal Victor has not forgotten his old trade. I will shoulder a musket and take my place in the guard." Moved by this response, Napoleon relented and gave Victor command of a corps of young guard. 2 weeks later, he was badly wounded at the Battle of Craon and took no further part in the war. A month later, Napoleon abdicated, and Victor switched his loyalty to the Bourbon monarchy with surprising zeal. He led an investigation into former comrades who'd supported Napoleon during the 100 Days, and was one of only 2 active marshals to vote for the death penalty for Marshal Ney, a decision he later claimed to regret. Victor later served as Minister of War, but retired from public life in 1830, following the overthrow of the Bourbon monarchy. 10. Marshal Murat.
I love the quotes from Napoleon, they're so brutal.
Joachim Murat, the son of an innkeeper, was destined for a career in the church, but dropped out of college and joined a cavalry regiment instead. To his immense frustration, he saw little action in the early years of the Revolutionary Wars, being stuck with staff and training roles. But in 1795, while stationed in Paris with the 21st Chasseurs, fate intervened. A young general, Napoleon Bonaparte, had been put in charge
Napoleon met everybody.
of the defense of the National Convention. With a mob poised to storm the building, he ordered Captain Murat to bring him cannons, which he did, racing the guns through the city streets, allowing Napoleon to mow down the mob with a famous whiff of grape shot. Napoleon was hailed as the saviour of the government and rewarded with command of the Army of Italy. Murat was promoted colonel and went with him as his new aide-de-camp.
It's interesting how, in history, whatever side wins, that side is the honorable one. because in this case, because the mob was annihilated and they didn't succeed in overthrowing the government, it was them that they were they were the bad seeds, so to speak. But if they won, like the Americans, if the Americans lost, if George Washington lost against the British, he would be a terrorist. But because it's all history is all about who wins, who loses, perspective, allegiances, all that.
He soon made a name for himself as a bold and brilliant leader of cavalry, while his 6-foot height, curly locks and love of women ensured fame as France's foremost beau sabreur.
Yeah.
In 1798, Murat joined Napoleon's expedition to Egypt. At the Battle of Aboukir, his flanking charge broke the enemy, and Murat personally took the Ottoman commander prisoner, despite being shot in the jaw, a wound which
What? I love how he just overlooks those things. He's like, in spite of being shot in the jaw, he was able to, what? Whoa, give a pause here. He has to, let me recollect myself. He was shot in the jaw? What?
to his immense relief, did not ruin his looks.
Can you
Back
be more
in
vain?
Paris, Napoleon launched his coup d'etat to seize political power. When he got a hostile reception from the Council of 500, it was Murat who saved the day, leading troops in to clear the chamber, shouting, "Citizens, you have been dissolved," before adding something a bit more coarse. His place at the future emperor's side was further assured when he married Napoleon's youngest sister.
Whoa. Let's go back. I've never seen the full family tree of the Bonaparte family. So you have Carlo, who's the father of everything. Then Laetitia. Then you have Joseph, the older brother. Napoleon, Lucien, Elisa, Louis. I know that Joseph became the king of France. Louis became the king of the Holland, I think. Jérôme became the king of Württemberg. Might be mistaken. So it's a big family, man. Elisa, okay.
The emperor's side was further assured when he married Napoleon's youngest sister, Caroline, in 1800. Later that year, he commanded the French cavalry reserve at Marengo and helped Napoleon to win a decisive victory over the Austrians. When Napoleon established his empire in 1804, Murat became a marshal, second in seniority.
He's the king of Naples. Jesus Christ! I was wondering, is it Davout or Murat? It's Murat. The guy that bounced from the army at the end. He's like, I'm going to Naples. I'm gonna go secure it, but he switched sides and he gets fucked in the ass at the end.
Only to Berthier.
Yeah.
He'd later also received the title Prince of the Empire and the rank of Grand Admiral. In the 1805 campaign, he commanded Napoleon's cavalry reserve, his excellent reconnaissance and diversions proving crucial in the encirclement of General Mack's Austrian army at Ulm. 3 weeks later, Murat and Marshal Lannes, who normally couldn't stand each other, together bluffed an Austrian commander into surrendering a vital bridge by persuading him that an armistice had been signed when it hadn't. It was a bold stunt, but overall Napoleon was not impressed by Murat's pursuit of the enemy. "I cannot approve your manner of march. You go on like a stunned fool, taking not the least notice of my orders." Yet in battle, Murat remained a brilliant and inspiring leader, as demonstrated at Austerlitz, and the next year at Jena, where he led the decisive charge, wielding only his riding crop. The next year,
What the hell is a riding crop?
with the Russians poised to break through his centre, Napoleon ordered Murat to lead a mass cavalry charge straight at the enemy. Murat's men succeeded and saved the army from disaster, though at a terrible price in men and horses. Napoleon had rewarded Murat in 1806 by making him sovereign prince of the Grand Duchy of Berg. In 1808, he sent Murat to Spain to act as his representative. Spain was still a French ally, But in May, Napoleon's heavy-handed meddling in Spanish affairs triggered a ferocious backlash. Madrid rose up against the French garrison, and Murat's troops fought back with brutal force, killing around 200, executing 300 more. When Napoleon deposed Spain's Bourbon monarchy, Murat hoped he'd be made the new king of Spain. But that title went to Napoleon's brother, Joseph.
Why would you think you were gonna be made king of Spain, man?
Murat instead received the throne of Naples. If it felt like second prize, it wasn't bad going for an innkeeper's son, college dropout, and ex-cavalry trooper.
What the dude, the guy, Murat, okay, get off your high horse, you piece of shit. You're the son of that innkeeper, you become king of Naples, you're like, oh, the second prize, kill yourself.
Napoleon expected Murat to merely represent his interests in Naples, but Murat had other ideas. He reformed the Neapolitan army, equipping it with splendid new uniforms, and turned a blind eye to smuggling, which undermined Napoleon's economic war against Britain, the so-called continental system. Relations between Murat and the emperor became strained.
Yeah.
But when Napoleon began planning to invade Russia in 1812, only Murat would do to lead his cavalry. Their differences were put to one side. Murat took command of 4 cavalry corps and became Napoleon's second in command. During the advance into Russia, Murat's cavalry faced a difficult and frustrating task, trying to locate the enemy in a vast landscape. Horses died in their thousands from poor fodder and exhaustion, and they faced a dangerous and wily opponent in Russia's Cossacks. Murat, always riding with the advance guard, was so fearless and conspicuous in his extravagant uniforms that the Cossacks came to admire him, calling out "Hurrah, Murat!" whenever they saw him, and hoped to capture him alive if possible. Murat was among those who tried to persuade Napoleon to halt the advance at Smolensk, but was ignored. At the great clash between the French and Russian armies at Oudinot, Murat was at his best, directing a series of attacks on the Russian earthworks, always where the action was hottest, inspiring all with his courage. Murat remained with the army during the retreat from Moscow, though his magnificent cavalry had virtually ceased to exist. One eyewitness noted that throughout the ordeal, he never neglected his appearance. Even at the Berezina he looked splendid, in an open-necked shirt, velvet cloak, a white feather in his cap. When Napoleon left the army to return to Paris, he gave command to Marshal Murat. But Murat, now primarily concerned with hanging on to his kingdom, left the army a month later and returned to Naples, where he opened secret negotiations with the coalition. He offered to join the war against Napoleon if the other powers would let him keep his crown, but he received only a lukewarm response. So in 1813, when Napoleon...
Yeah, why wasn't he, like, welcomed with open arms? Like, I guess, he was a turncoat and all that, but if you were part of the coalition, wouldn't you get as many allies as you can? Why would you care if this guy keeps a kingdom on the other end of nowhere, in Italy?
And asked Murat to join him in Germany to fight for their thrones together, he answered the call. Murat had become increasingly difficult to work with, oversensitive about his royal status, prone to tantrums, but in battle as fearless as ever. At Dresden, his charge through rain and mud shattered the Austrian left wing and paved the way for victory. But then at Liebert-Volkwitz, he showed his limitations when not under Napoleon's direct command, getting drawn into a major and unnecessary cavalry battle with coalition forces, and twice nearly being captured himself. 2 days later, at the Battle of Leipzig, he led another of history's great cavalry charges, coming close to breaking the enemy centre, and even capturing the Allied monarchs. But it was not to be. The Battle of the Nations ended in a disastrous defeat. As Napoleon retreated to the French frontier, Murat informed the emperor that he was leaving for Naples, promising to raise fresh troops. Murat and Napoleon would never meet again. 3 months later, the King of Naples had cut a deal with the coalition and switched sides. So long as it was possible for me to believe that the Emperor Napoleon was fighting to bring peace and glory to France, I fought loyally at his side.
No. You can't say that. You can't be. Listen, maybe what he's saying is true, but I think at the end he was just fighting for himself. That's bullshit. Oh, he was fighting for. From the beginning, Napoleon was fighting, yes, for France and all that, but for himself, for pride, to establish a legacy. You can't be. While Napoleon was winning, always by his side, and at the moment, the boat rocks, you're like, the whole time I knew, the whole time, I was against him. Go fuck yourself, bitch. He was a great commander, prideful, and he rose in rank through his own merit, granted. But at the end, he wanted to keep what he so. I wonder if Napoleon, if he didn't give them the Kingdom of Naples, if he would have turned against them. Because when you give people, gifts, you think I'm gonna give someone a gift and they're gonna be indebted to me, to be loyal. But depending on the gifts,
Murat declared.
They
But
might turn on
now
you.
I know that the Emperor's sole desire is war. However, Murat's commitment to the Sixth Coalition was distinctly half-hearted. His army marched against Eugene's forces in northern Italy, but had done no actual fighting before news arrived of Napoleon's abdication. Murat then began to suspect what had been obvious to Napoleon at least. The coalition was not going to honour its promise, and Murat would be next to lose his throne. So, in 1815, encouraged by news of Napoleon's return from exile, Murat marched north against the Austrians, proclaiming a war for Italian freedom and independence. Just 7 weeks later, his campaign ended in defeat at the Battle of Tolentino. With the British and Austrians closing in, Murat became a hunted fugitive. He sailed to France, but Napoleon had not forgiven his betrayal and refused to see him.
Fuck you.
After Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, he fled to Corsica, gathered a small band of volunteers and returned to Italy in a hopelessly doomed attempt to start a revolution and reclaim his throne. Chased by a mob and arrested on the beach, Murat was sentenced to death by the restored Bourbon monarchy of Naples. He met his end with his usual courage, telling the firing squad, "If you wish to spare me, aim at the heart," then gave the order to fire himself. Murat is rightly remembered as one of the great battlefield cavalry commanders of history. Inspirational, fearless, with brilliant tactical instinct. But outside of combat, he was, in Napoleon's estimation, a very poor general. He always waged war without maps. Worse, when the conflict turned against France, he allowed self-interest and vanity to prevail over loyalty to the emperor. As Napoleon's chief of staff, Marshal Berthier, once told him, "You're only a king by the grace of Napoleon and French blood. It's black ingratitude that's blinding you."
Yeah, he's right.
Saint-Cyr, Oudinot, Victor, Murat. 17 down, 9 to go.
Okay, part 4. This is part 3. We're going on part 4 after this. Thank you for watching the video. My thoughts. I don't know why I was so harsh on Murat. You can say that, he's a turncoat and he's looking for his own self-interest. I would do the same, though. I would. Towards the end, I don't really blame anybody after Russia and Spain, to be honest. if they jumped boat because it was looking like horrible, you know. But yeah, Napoleon was able to. What's incredible to me still, you know, is how many incredible men, diverse and just so talented and just interesting, were born and were in the army at the same time as Napoleon. 26 marshals and Napoleon. It was just very interesting how everybody was born and rose through the ranks at the same time. You know, it must have been like quite a surreal time in history where you don't have only Napoleon, you have other great leaders in terms of military genius, as much as Napoleon. But maybe they have, their own quirks. Maybe they're not as ambitious politically. Maybe they're more noble, like Saint-Cyr. But Oudinot, the guy's a badass. Oudinot, whoever the subscriber who wrote me about Oudinot, you're right, man. The guy was wounded 36 times, 34, 36, and he survived. Especially with the medicine back in the 19th century, early 19th century. Dude. Anyways, I hope you like my reaction. If you did, like, subscribe, and all that. And I'll see you guys next time.